All right. And now we have everybody coming in. We've got Yun from Melbourne. Hello, Yun. We've got Quinton from South Africa. Aditya. We've got Bob Umless. Oh, we've got a few MVPs here. Peter Bartholomew. Welcome, welcome. Hello from Greece. Hello from the Netherlands. Well, hello, welcome. Good evening. I am based in Sydney, Australia. My name is Danielle Stein-Verhurst. I'm a financial modelling specialist, and I'm joined today by Jan Karel Pieterse, who is joining us from the Netherlands. So what time is it for you, Jan?
It's exactly 10 a.m. for me today.
Very civilized time of day. So we run these sessions at different times of day, and it's all over the place. So we have very different times of day all over. So we've got people joining us from, wow, we've got someone from Namibia, Colombo, Sri Lanka, all over. So I really enjoy running these sessions because I get to learn from different people all over the world, and I often hear from MVPs and I am a Microsoft MVP, as is Jan. He has been an MVP much, much longer than I have. You have been an MVP since 2002, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So,
long time ago.
yes, so the whole process of being an Excel specialist who is awarded an MVP status for their work with Excel is a really exciting thing to have. So Jan is the developer of RefTreeAnalyser, which is an add-in to help track down to do model auditing or Excel formula auditing, and particularly with circular references. So he's going to talk to us today a little bit about how to untangle, some of the situations you can get yourself into with different formulas, and particularly for financial modelers, the issue of circularity can be a really big issue, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So I'll hand over to you, Jan, and let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, as you already said, I've been an MVP since 2002, but before that, I actually was a chemical engineer. So I'm not into financial modeling, I'm afraid. I'm just an Excel expert, so to speak. So having done polymer processing research for 16 years, I decided on a career shift and started doing Excel consulting. Because as you probably won't know, if you're an engineer, you get to work a lot with data, creating charts and doing the analysis, and that's where my spreadsheet knowledge came from. And I actually found that I started to enjoy working with the data more than I actually enjoyed doing the chemical work. So hence my career move. So that's where we are now. So 20 years later, I'm still doing the consulting bit. So let me start sharing my screen. Find the right screen. You gotta love these apps. Is my screen visible, Danielle?
Yes, I can see your Excel.
Good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, what you're looking at is actually Excel inside a virtual computer. That means that I can share everything on that computer without you guys seeing what else is on my screen. And before I start doing stuff with that add-in of mine, I thought it might be interesting to just, show a bit of the built-in stuff that Excel has on offer
Yeah,
regarding
because there's
formula
a lot that
auditing.
Excel can do. There's a whole lot of formula auditing tools that we've been given. It's just we can go a little bit further sometimes. So yeah, show us
Yeah.
what's there.
Yeah. So the first thing that I always do on any new Office installation is change some settings. So I'm going to File, Options, and I go to the Formulas tab and change the color of the formula error indicator, because I've never understood why the Excel team chose green for an error.
Oh, interesting.
Because in my mind, green
Yeah,
is perfectly all right.
that's true.
So I switched that to orange.
Okay.
just because I like it better, and it makes these small triangles stand out more on my screen.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the first thing I do on every Office installation, turn that little triangle in a color that I like better because it, alerts me more. So I have this little X lookup formula here, and it's really a contrived example, of course, which is probably in any presentation. I just wanted to quickly demonstrate a couple of handy things if you're editing inside the formula bar. Um, so one of the first things is that this little tooltip here gets in the way. You can
It
drag
does.
it out of the way.
Yeah,
So if
nice.
you move your mouse, let me zoom in. If you move your mouse until it changes to these four arrows,
Yeah,
you can drag it out of the way.
nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that not many people know is that when you're in the formula, you see that in the tooltip, the part that is relevant changes into bold. And if you hover your mouse over it, you see that you can actually click those items. And what that does is it selects the entire argument of the formula, that argument part of the formula. So if you click return array, it's going to select that table prices square bracket price.
Mhm.
So that's why I sometimes prefer using the formula bar over using the in-cell editing because that lacks that feature.
Mm,
You have to actually click in the formula bar to get this available.
mm.
Because sometimes it's really hard to select, just the argument that you're interested in because, it takes you too far or just, you miss that last character. And then when you start editing, you have this additional extra square bracket that's in the way. Whereas if you just click the reference here, it's going to
Yeah,
select the entire thing.
yeah. And that's a relatively new change, isn't it? The fact that when you highlight it, it comes up with a preview. See how it kind of pops up with the
Yeah, so the
25?
little 25 that you see here, that's,
Yeah.
well, I think it's in here for a bit over a year or something.
Yeah, it's relatively,
Um,
yeah.
it's relatively new. It's probably older than a year, but it's not
Mm,
been in the product very long indeed.
yeah.
Especially if you're like me, you've been spreadsheeting for over 30 years, then that's relatively new.
Yeah, yes, exactly, exactly. Yeah, they keep
Yeah.
sort of throwing in these new features and you yeah, got to keep up with them. Mm.
Yes, it's sometimes not that easy to keep up. So there's also some shortcut keys that are interesting if you're, editing a formula. Um, right now I'm in point mode. There's a little thing in the way here. Let me try and get that out of the way. Currently, the status bar below on the left is showing edit. And
Hmm.
when it says edit, it means if I start typing, it's going to directly change in the formula. So
Hmm.
I can, and I can use my arrow keys to move around. If I hit the F2 key once, it's going to change. It should change. Ah, Danielle, I'm not into Zoom, but there's this little annotate icon
Ah,
that's right in the way where I
oh,
want to
yes, yes,
look.
I know what you mean. It's very annoying. Are you able to move it aside? You should be able to just kind of drag it to somewhere else.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, it just pops
yeah,
right back into where it was.
very annoying. But we can see it. It says enter in the bottom corner.
Yeah, well, I was expecting it to change when I hit
And
the
now it says
F2
edit.
key.
It's changed to edit.
Right, I can
Yeah,
only see
edit,
the E,
enter.
and
Yeah, it's
they both
changing.
start with the E, so that's not really that convenient. But if you hit F2 once, it changes to edit, and then if you hit the arrow keys, it's going to change the selection.
Yeah, nice. I never noticed that little the point. Yeah, now it says point. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been easier if they would, change the icon of the mouse or something,
Uh-huh. Yes. I
because
never even noticed that. It's just a tiny little thing in the corner, very bottom.
yeah, and because I never ever look at it, I also don't know which of the labels mean.
Mm,
Because, let me escape and click in the formula again. It currently says what it says edit.
edit. Mm,
And if you then F2 once, let me click this first. And if I now F2,
enter. Mm.
it says enter, and I never know which is which. And especially in boxes like in the conditional formatting formula box, um, where if I'm always used to start to edit the formula, expecting that I'm going to move the cursor, but then I
Mm.
hit one of my arrow
Oh,
keys, and then
yes.
I get this huge bit in the formula, which
Yeah.
wrecks up my formula. I have to escape all the way back to
All the
Excel and
time.
go back into
All the
its.
time. Mm.
I hate that, but
Yeah.
okay. Um, so apart from hitting F2, if you have the portion of the formula highlighted that's an entire cell reference, you can also hit the F5 key, which is the go-to key, and
Yes.
then
Very.
just press enter, and it will take you to the cell in question. But not only does it take you in the cell, if you look in the status bar, it also mentions points. So now you can start moving your mouse or your selection around, and it's going to actually update the formula.
Oh,
And
okay.
if you hold down the shift key while you're moving, it's also extending the range and
Mm.
etc.
Okay. So it's a way of actually editing from within the formula bar. Mm.
Yeah, but there's a snag there. Um, if I start off with something that is on a different sheet,
Mhm.
so if I hit F5 here and I press enter, notice in the reference here
Yeah.
that it changes to regular cell references. So that's kind of, well, a bummer for me.
Mm.
But still, it works. If you click OK, it's going to bring you to that location. So the table prices widget column,
Mhm.
and it's not changing the cell reference in the formula. So that is
Yeah.
fine. So
Yeah.
you can do the same with the table prices. If you F with the price column, if you F5 enter, it's going to take you to the price column, which is
Nice. Nice.
nice.
Yeah.
Um, but now notice the F30. So if I now hit F5, notice what's in the reference box. It just says F30. So if I click OK now, it's going to take me to F30 on the data sheet rather than the
Because
visualized sheet.
it's on a different tab.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
for some reason, Excel doesn't know that, or,
Mhm.
you know, so
Yeah.
if I now click OK, it changes my formula. Notice
Ah,
how the
no, we don't want
formula
that.
changed and
Mm.
added the data exclamation mark. So it does seem to know that we're on a different sheet. It
Yeah.
just forgot that the formula was on a visual sheet and that
Mhm.
we don't need that F30 prepended with the sheet name there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I enter now, I'm going to wreck my formula because it's now taking data from the wrong sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we don't want that.
So that's kind of a
Good, good.
snag.
We've got a comment from Bob Amler saying, if I recall, using control with the arrow key will always be in edit mode.
Control with the arrow key.
Arrow. So when you hold down
So
control
if
and
I'm
arrow,
here, which I'm
always.
currently in, what's it? Drag that thing out of the way. I'm currently in edit mode.
Hmm.
I probably need to shift first, right?
Mm.
Well,
Mm.
maybe you should ask Bob to demo that.
We'll get Bob in to do it for us.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see what I'm at. So I've clicked the links in that tooltip, shown you that. Press the F5 and warned you about that cell F30, which is on a different worksheet. So if
Yeah.
you've been to the other worksheet first and then click one of the, let's call them local cell references, and try to do that F5 trick again, be warned that you're probably changing the sheet of that reference and you might want to escape from
Mhm.
your formula rather than pressing enter because it's going
Mhm.
to wreck that. Okay, so that about editing a formula and some shortcut keys. Let me quickly show you some of the Excel built-in formula auditing stuff that's
Yeah.
there. So I'm here on that price formula and it shows NA because I deliberately changed the cell reference of the item that I'm looking at. Of course, that F30 is supposed to be F3, but that's for another for later. If I trace precedents, what Excel does is it shows you these errors, but I'm not really that fond of this interface to be well, to keep it neat and tidy. what it does here is anything that's on the sheet has a blue arrow, and I can double click that arrow to take me to that cell.
Yeah.
And I can double click the arrow again to take me back to the formula.
Yeah.
What's little known is that you can actually click that dashed arrow as well. So if you double click this, it shows the
Mm.
go-to dialog, and it shows all of the references inside the formula that points to different worksheets. And this also kind of gives away one of the issues with the go-to dialog, and that is that you cannot change its size. If you, as you see, if I move my mouse close to the edge, the pointer doesn't change. You cannot make this box wider or taller at
Yeah.
all.
Mhm.
And that is unfortunate because if, for example, you have a really, really long sheet name, and you try and do the same here, if I now double click this, you see that this A2 to A239 starts moving to the right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is a relatively short file name. It prepends the file
Yeah.
name as well.
Yeah.
And as you know, if you have, annual report version 1, take 2025-7-5, final, the cell reference is going to be out of view. And the only way to get at that cell reference without wrecking anything is to click in the reference bar, press F2, and then hit the end key because it's going to take you to the end. So that's really unfortunate if you have a larger file name.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's trace precedents on a regular Excel workbook using the built-in tools. So that's one. Let's get rid of these arrows here. And then, of course, you can also trace the dependence of a formula. So let's just
Mm.
go into, or a cell. It doesn't need to be a formula. I can trace dependence of my amount cell. And if I keep clicking this button, it's going to trace the dependence of the dependence
It
of the
keeps,
dependence.
yeah, the
It
dependent and then
keeps
another one.
extending, and this is a relatively simple workbook, but if you have a financial model of any serious size, it's going to fill your spreadsheet with errors all over the place. So while it's kind of feels neat to have that capability, I rarely use it because it gets confusing really, really quickly. And to be honest, I don't really have a good solution for that situation where you want to know the dependence of the dependence of the dependence, or even the precedence of the precedence of the precedence, because that does the same. So if I keep clicking this, it's going to do a similar thing. And as you can
Mm.
see, this is a very simple workbook. It only contains like 3 formulas, and already we're in kind of a tree of arrows. So yeah, that's not really that encouraging either. It's
Mm.
one of the reasons why I received that phone call by a New York investment bank that they had this issue with references and they wanted a tool to make tracing references easier. That
Mm.
was back in 2006,
Is that
which is
what got you
when
started on getting into this? Yeah.
exactly, yes, that's what got me started.
Mm.
So yeah, so that is more or less this. So one of the issues with these trace dependence and trace precedence too is that I wanted to click this one, sorry about that, is that cells that are outside of the viewable area are not necessarily easy to see. You have to either double click the arrow, which actually
Yeah.
removes the view of the formula itself because it takes you to a different area of the sheet and it also selects the cell.
Yeah.
And you have to go, you have to also precisely aim at that arrow to be able to double click on it. It doesn't take
Mm.
you back to exactly where your viewable range was.
Bob's just
I-
mentioning the control shift back square bracket shortcut that will select the dependence, or just control back square bracket will jump to the precedent. So there's a couple of shortcuts that can kind of jump
yes,
backwards and forwards, but
thank
yeah,
you for reminding me that.
yeah,
So if you hit the control left square bracket, so that is the key that is the third button on the left of the backslash key.
It's next to the P for me.
Yes, next to the P on the US International keyboard. And right to the right of that is the right control, the right square bracket, which takes you to dependent. So if I'm on this price formula here, if I hit control left square bracket, it selects the precedents on the same worksheet. So let me just contrive a simple formula that's adding B1 and B3. If I press control left square bracket, it selects both of the precedents of this formula that are on the same sheet. If I add a cell on a different sheet, like on this sheet, if I now hit control left square bracket, it's only going to select the B1 and B3 because Excel is not capable of selecting cells on different sheets at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just ignoring that off-sheet reference. On the other end, if you only have, if that external sheet reference is the first one, if I hit control left square bracket now, it's going to take me to the really, really long sheet L13 reference. And by the way, to go back, you just hit F5, enter. So if you have a formula that has its first reference pointing to a different sheet, a really quick way to go there is to just press control left square bracket. And a really quick way to go back is just F5, enter. Which is, by the way, if you've clicked any link or any shortcut that takes you to another cell, F5, enter takes you back to where you came from.
Back to where you were. Yeah, nice one.
Let's see, what else did I plan to discuss? Trace errors. Errors is hard to pronounce for me as a Dutchman. So the error checking options that Excel has on offer. So as you can see, turnover shows NA, and that's, of course, that is because I'm trying to multiply 92 with the price, which is displaying NA now because it's taking the wrong cell reference. So if I change that F30 to F3, all is well, and I have my price there. But currently it's in error. So if I go to the error checking dialog that Excel has, let me zoom, let me just reposition this and zoom in a little bit. It tells me that it kind of tries to give me a hint of what's wrong here. A value is not available to the formula or function. So that's just trying to explain what the NA error is for. What did you say, Danielle?
Oh, I said it's not very helpful, the description.
No, I can understand that because, it's not actually evaluating the formula and checking what's wrong here. It's just trying to give you the generic message that belongs to the hash NA. If there would be a 1 divide by 0 there, it would tell you, well, you're trying to divide something by 0, and that's giving you a diff 0 error. Of course, that is more obvious. So you can click trace error on this dialog, and it's just going to give you, well, the trace precedents, really. So it's actually the same as clicking trace precedents. Let me remove the error and click trace precedents. It kind of gives you the same. Well, actually, it does more because it also shows you. Interesting. You see, this is why presenting is good because you get to learn new things yourself as well. So error checking tries to highlight only the parts that are relevant for the error itself. So it's telling me, okay, this formula is using cell F30 and it has an off-sheet reference to, these two. And you can actually try and do the previous and next because that's going to just take you to the next cell that has an error. So if I do previous, it's going to move up to cell F7 because that is probably the root. And then it shows you more options because this is actually where the problem is.
Yeah, I've never found that tool very helpful. I would only use it to find out if there is an error, if there's any error at all on the entire sheet, or if you're trying to track down a circular reference, probably the only other way I would use it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
Yeah, and
there's
look at this
values.
evaluate formula bar. But box.
Yeah.
The formula bar part is empty,
Mm,
whereas you would be expecting it to show that X lookup formula and then give you the option to
not very helpful.
evaluate the steps
Mm,
in that formula. It's not helpful at all. Okay, so that is the error thing. I already mentioned the coloring of the error indicators, so that is done. I'm just looking at my short list of what I'm presenting, just so you know what I'm doing.
yeah.
Um, Another thing that financial modelers run into a lot is circular references.
Mm,
Um, and in the article that I wrote, probably over a decade ago, Um, I mentioned there are different types of circular references. And I think the most important type of circular reference that people encounter is the, how shall I put it? The unfortunate ones. So the ones that you entered by accident, the
yeah,
accidental ones.
inadvertent. Mm,
Yeah.
deliberate
Um,
or inadvertent. Yeah.
yeah. So that's the two different types of circular references that there are generically. This is a contrived workbook. It has a number of circular references, but Excel is only capable of displaying one of them. And currently it tells me that there's a circular reference that starts in cell E13. So that is this cell over here. You can find out which other cells there are by clicking on the drop down next to error checking and then highlighting the circular references option, and it tells me that
Mm,
the circle is comprised of E13, G11, E9, and C11. So those are the ones that the red arrows are currently pointing at. So Excel does its best to highlight the circular reference, but it only does one.
yeah.
And that's kind of
Um,
unfortunate, isn't
Yeah,
it?
this I think the worst thing that can happen to a modeler is, this kind of situation often happens when you inherit a model. So somebody sends it to you and you open it up and it says, oh, there's an error in here. And then you're trying a circular reference and you've got to try and track it down. And they can be quite hard to find.
Yeah, especially if they are spread across multiple worksheets. I've seen models where a single circular reference was consisted of like 25 different cell ranges spread across like three or
Mm.
four different worksheets, and that is really, really hard to troubleshoot.
Yeah, yeah. I know some modelers will allow a circular reference deliberately. So if you've got, with your debt calculation, that will drive your interest, and your interest will drive your P&L, and then the P&L is based on it's an input. Interest is an input into your P&L, which drives your cash flow, which drives your debt, which then drives your interest, and you end up with a circular reference, which really should be allowed because it should be your debt or your interest should be calculated based on the average between your opening balance and your closing balance. And but that if you do it like that, then you end up with a circular reference. So your options are to either allow the circular reference and enable iterative calculations, but don't.
Yeah.
If you do that, I just think it's a slippery slope if you start doing that. So
Well,
it's a
yeah, I
real
mean, if
problem.
if you
Yeah.
turn it on, it kind of fixed the issue of having that error there.
Yes.
You see that parts of my worksheet now displays numbers rather than
Yeah.
mistakes. But by the way, this model also has a user-defined function in there. And
Okay.
I think I haven't turned on macros, so that's why it's showing the hashtag name error. And if you have a circular reference, even if you turn on iteration, that error is going to propagate through all the entirety of the circular reference chain. Um, so if you do have circular references, make sure you have a breaker cell. So if I empty this cell, it's going to break the circular reference chain and it's going to reset all of my cells to a default value. So it's a good idea to have a breaker cell. And then Once you're confident that your model is okay, you can turn on the circularity again by just entering like a 1 or a yes or whatever you find convenient.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
going to do the calculation. And as you can see, this model of mine, which was contrived to deliberately, of course, show the issues that you have with things like circularity, is we have a very good example here of a circular reference chain that goes out of control. Every time you hit the F9 key, it's going to do that 100 iterations again, and it's going to make things worse and worse and worse. So that there's actually two types of circularities that you can have in your model. No, actually three. There's one that the one that you want is the one that converges to a valid value, a valid result. But then there's two other situations you can end up in. And the first situation is that the values in your model are going to keep increasing, 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 or decreasing, decreasing, decreasing. So that is the one that, runs out of control. And then there's another one that starts alternating between negative and positive values or something like that. So that's the one that I call an oscillating circularity. And neither of those two are ones that you want to be into, of course. So
Mm.
that's one of the reasons why a breaker cell in your circular model is really, really important, because it is close to impossible to get out of this state without actually changing the formula first. So let's just break the chain so we're back to square one and turn it back on and demonstrate that this thing is running out of control again. Okay, Danielle, were there any questions you might,
No, just
steer me at?
some useful comments from a few people. So Bob Umness has said if it's a long chain, he says it's often useful to put an apostrophe in one of the cells and see if the circularity disappears. And if it doesn't,
Yeah,
remove the apostrophe, try the next one in the chain, so you can kind of get through the chain that way. So that's a good little tip. Thanks for that, Bob.
like this.
Yeah, a couple of little gems there from Bob. So
Yeah.
Aditya is saying, but how to know where the circularity is starting in the first place, in case I've got like 20 sheets and there is a long chain. That's
Well, that is a challenge, of course,
yeah.
because given the nature of a circular reference, a circle also doesn't have a starting or ending point. It's just an endless
Yeah.
thing. So there's no way of telling what the actual start of a circular reference is, right? Um, but it is a good idea if you're creating a deliberate circular reference to know what your starting point of the circular reference chain is. For example, this cell here, it has a dependent, which are these three. And if you look at these cells, there is this if B1 equals 1 formula there. And that is the way that I'm actually making or breaking the circle. So you could say that cell E5 is my starting point of the first circle in this workbook, which, by the way, has 3 circular references. And I'll come back to that later when I do the demonstration of my RefTreeAnalyser add-in, because that doesn't start with circular references, but well, we could switch it around if you like. So let's see what my RefTreeAnalyser does with that.
Yeah.
Let me first
So we've kind
clear
of
all those.
explored what Excel or native Excel will do for us in terms of formula auditing. So
Yeah,
we're going to have a look now at what RefTreeAnalyser can do.
yeah. So Excel currently is in iterative state, which is why it's not showing the circular reference at all here. So if you if we go back into tools options, sorry, tools options is Excel 2003 speak. Um, I, I've been with Excel so long that I still use the Excel 2003 shortcut keys from the menu to get to things really
And most of them
quickly.
still work.
And most of them still work. So when I need the Excel options pane, I don't go to the hassle of clicking File, moving all the way down to Options, and then getting the options. I just hit Alt-TO. Um, and then arrow down to get to the formula section and turn off the iterative calculation. Because the only way to get the formula warning, the circularity warning back is to turning this off. And by the way, another thing that is really important is the setting of iterative calculation is determined by the first workbook that you open in your Excel session. So if I open a workbook that has this switched on, it's going to be on for any subsequent workbook that I open in Excel.
Is it the
So
first
if you're
one?
not,
Yeah, I thought it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the first workbook that you open in a session. Then if you close out all of the Excel workbooks, then it's again going to be the first, well, the next workbook that you open after you've closed all of the Excel workbooks that you had open. So I'm switching it off here to get us back into that error mode. It's bringing back this dialog again, and it's, showing me these arrows. But funny enough, the arrows are now blue rather than red, which is
Mm.
interesting. Because as maybe you recall that they used to be red when I first opened this Excel file.
Mm.
For some silly reason, they're blue now.
Mm.
Okay. To RefTreeAnalyser then, it has a small button to trace circular references. It's right over here. And if you click that, it's first going to ask you whether I want to create a backup of the file first, because to be honest, the only way to track down all of the circularities is by actually changing the formulas in the file. So the trick that Bob almost mentioned, commenting out one of the formulas, that is exactly what RefTreeAnalyser is doing behind the scenes. It's just doing that on steroids. So it's actually tracking down all of the cells that are part of the current circularity and changing them each in turn and then doing all of the other ones. So
And
I'm not
you've
going to
built
break a,
this, you built this add-in using VBA, right?
yes, it's VBA entirely. And that is mainly because there are limitations to what other programming languages can do with
Mm.
Excel. I could have built this using VB.NET, for example. It's just that then you get into the problems of this that many companies don't allow their users to install software on their computers.
Mm.
And as you know, an add-in you can just send by email, and people can then save it to desktop, unblock it, and use it.
Mm.
So
Mm. I
let's
was going to
just
ask you about that actually. But people still have trouble sometimes do that. Like if someone was on a work machine and they have strict security, do they still need IT to install it?
sometimes they do, unfortunately, yes.
Mhm.
Some IT departments just disallow downloading any Excel workbooks at all, which I kind of understand because there's so much rubbish out there. And of
Yeah.
course, it can be dangerous. I mean, if you download something from a source that you don't know is trustworthy and you just enable macros, you might run into really big problems. And that's mainly because VBA is such a capable language. It can do anything to your Windows installation, for example. Okay, so circular references with RefTreeAnalyser. I've turned off creating a backup, and then there's two different modes, the fast mode and the more thorough mode is I'm going to do the simple one because it will find everything in this particular example workbook. And it's giving me all of the circles that are in the workbook. And if you click on a circle, it will highlight the circle in question and also draw all of the precedent arrows. Um,
Yeah.
which I'm sure there's an option to turn off so you not get distracted by all of the errors. But
Mm-hmm.
I use this tool in such many different circumstances that even myself forget what options I have added to it. Um, this tree view allows you to also expand it so that you can actually see what cell references there are, and it also shows you which formula are in those cells in this dialog as well. But you can
Yeah.
also click through them and it will traverse through all of the different cells, and then it will go to the next circle.
Yeah. And
go
then
into those.
does it make the change for you, or you need to go through and make the change manually?
I'm afraid this tool is only about showing you where they
Find
are,
Finding it. Okay. Which is very
finding
helpful.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful in itself because um, I tried to imagine a way to advise the user where to break the chain, but in the end, I decided not to because it is impossible to predict where the start of the circle is, like that brilliant question in the
Yeah.
chat just now. Um, yeah, that is really almost impossible to determine that. So I decided against making any suggestions to change things. So yeah, I think this is probably the only tool on the planet that's actually capable of showing you all of the circular references. But there is a small disclaimer to make, and that is if something changes in the values in your workbook, the circular references might also change. So I've now deliberately broken all of the circular references. If I now click my circular reference button, it's not going to find any of them. See, it says here, no circular references found. And that is because even
Well,
this tool depends on what Excel knows are the circular references. It
yeah.
just has it's smarter than Excel in in a way that it removes the circular references one by one to make sure that it detects all of them.
Mhm.
And so if you break the circular references, then it's not going to be able to find them anymore.
Mhm.
So if I now click the button, it's going to find them again.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. If you update your formulas or if there are if statements in the formula that, change the direction of the formula, so to speak, change the order in which the calculations or actually change which cells are in use inside the formula, that will also change whether or not the circular references are found. And that is a limitation of this little tool.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's that.
Great.
Okay. Any questions about circular references? Otherwise,
Not at this stage, not at this stage. So,
okay.
yeah, there's a couple of other really cool things I know that the add-in can do. So, yeah,
Yeah,
can't
let's
wait for you
move
to
on
show
with that.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just first start with, oh, that's great. I love these pop-ups, don't you?
Thank you, Microsoft.
Thank you, Windows. Really fine, really good. It's nonsense. By the way, it's nonsense as well because that actually that
Ah,
account is set to never expire. It still pops up every time.
mhm.
Um, So yes, so tracing precedents and dependence is, I think that is the core of what RefTreeAnalyser actually does. So actually
Yeah, that was kind of, yeah.
circular reference checking, that's actually something that came in later, to be honest. The very first capability that was there is tracing precedents. Um, as I already demonstrated the control left square bracket, that is what opens up the regular Excel trace precedents.
Mhm.
But the trace precedence button of RefTreeAnalyser also has a shortcut key, and that is Control Shift left square bracket. So it's actually the curly brace, the opening curly brace. But let's just click the button here, and it's going to open the tracing cell dependence and precedence dialog. And
Mhm.
basically, all that you need to do now to trace the constituents of your formula is hitting the down arrow key. So currently it selects the formula cell. If I now hit down arrow, it's going to select the first cell reference inside my formula, F30. And it immediately takes you to that cell on the grid.
Mhm.
And it also highlights the formula, that part in the formula right over here.
Okay.
And if I keep arrowing down, it's going to select the next one. So that's taking you to the widgets columns in this
Yeah.
price table. And then it's going to take me to the price column in the price table. And there's two ways
Right.
to close this dialog. So you could just hit escape and it's going to dismiss the dialog and it's going to take me right back to where I started. So it's selecting the cell with the formula that I started auditing. But the alternative is that so suppose we are here, you can also click that close button over here, and that's going to keep you where you are right now.
Mm.
So it's going to just, you stay in the widgets column. I see that it just selected the first cell of that column. So trace precedents, you click Control left square bracket, Control Shift left square bracket, I mean, because otherwise it's going to bring the old Excel. Control left square bracket is this one, whereas Control Shift left square bracket, that is RefTreeAnalyser. And by the way, if this dialog box is showing, you can still interact with the worksheet and click anywhere you like,
Oh,
edit your
yeah.
formula and everything. So this is what they call a modeless dialog. You can click out of
Mm.
it and work with Excel.
Nice.
Um, I tried to add a option to it to place this RefTreeAnalyser dialog box next to Excel, but it is really, really difficult to program that.
Is
So
it?
I'm interested to see what happens if I click this little tile box here. What it should do is place the RefTreeAnalyser dialog right to the right of the Excel window and make the Excel window slightly more narrow. Oh wow, it works surprisingly well in this
It sounds
resolution on
so
this virtual
surprised.
machine.
Yeah,
But if you have a really large monitor like I do,
yeah.
this might lead to surprises, to be honest.
Okay, okay.
So I made this feature because my customer specifically requested it, and it worked really well on their situation, but it might not work that well on your screen.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, though that's why I probably myself never use it. I might sometimes. By the way, this window remembers how big or small you made it. So if you resize it to this and you open it next time, it's going to appear in the same size and position. You can also change the size of the boxes that are in between if you're not interested in those. And
Mm.
if you have this really long formula with lots and lots of references, you can make that reference box larger. But there's a minimum, as you can see. This is the best I can do. Okay. So yeah, so it does. I think I use it for precedence tracking like 95% of the time. That is my main usage of this add-in because I get sent so many workbooks that contain formulas and I need to analyze what's wrong with them. And so one of the first things I do is, try and look up the formulas that are really long and then start analyzing them and use the Control Shift left square bracket immediately and start tracing, okay, where does this go to? Where does it get its information from?
Mm.
Of course, it also does dependence. So let me select one that I know has dependence and click the dependence button. It opens up exactly the same window. Um, but funny enough, something's wrong here. I think it's in cell error mode because it's only showing cell. But this is interesting. Oh no, my bad. I needed to go here and click dependence. And as you see that the amount cell only has one dependent, and that's cell F8
Mm.
because that's using the amount.
Mm.
I'm confusing myself, and hence I'm also confusing my audience because I'm confused between precedence and dependence, and always confuses me. So that's precedence and dependence, and it's probably the thing that I use most of the time, as I already mentioned.
Show us the we've only got about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to see the name
Oh, yes.
manager and the calculation, the thing with the calculation speeds. I really like that one.
Yeah, let me do that first. Okay. So suppose you have a workbook that has many formulas, like any financial model, and the workbook calculates really slowly. There's this button in this tool that's called Report Formulas. And what it does is it takes every tab on your worksheet and finds all of the unique formulas in that tab. And what I mean by unique is a formula that you can drag anywhere or copy anywhere.
Love it. Yeah, yeah. unique formulas is something we always want to know, because that will, it's basically when you're auditing a model, you know, the more unique formulas you've got, the more that can go wrong. So you
Yep.
really want to know how many formulas you've got in the model.
Yeah, and what it's doing right now, it's also trying to find which
Mm.
contiguous ranges have share the same formula.
Okay.
And once it's done that, it's also going to time the calculation of
So
those
it's going through the
areas.
whole model and searching
Yes.
all the formulas. This is really
So
cool.
if you have a really slow calculated workbook, this might actually take minutes or more.
Mm.
So you might be up for a cup of coffee when you click that button. It will end in a, yeah,
Really
it's
done.
there
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
So it's going to show you all of your worksheets in this first
Yeah.
column.
This is
Then it's going to
great.
show you all of your formulas in the second column.
Uh-huh.
And then it shows in the third column the measured calculation time
Calculation
for that
time.
particular formula.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Short disclaimer here, calculation time depends on anything that your machine is doing. So if you happen to be in a Teams meeting or in a Zoom meeting, these numbers are completely different, or maybe completely
Mhm.
different from uh, when you've shut down Teams or Zoom or whatever you're working with.
Mm.
If you have 6 workbook open, these numbers will be totally different because Excel is calculating the rest of the workbooks as well at the same
Cool.
time, or might
Yeah.
be.
So results may vary.
Oh yes, if you want to do this properly, you probably would need to do this 20 times.
Mm. Mm.
But still, if you sort this column largest to smallest, it still gives you indication of what is the slowest
Mm.
function in your model. And if you then click on the used in thing, this is just a formula that points to all of the ranges that the formula on the left,
Okay.
that contains the formula on the left.
Mm.
And the good thing is you can now use the trace precedents tool of my RefTreeAnalyser
Ah,
to see which those are. So this just highlights the cells which have that formula.
yeah. So you can see them
And
all.
the interesting bit there as well is that it also gives you an indication whether there are holes in your formula. So if, for example, you intended to do this to
Ah,
be on a timeline and there's a break in that timeline somewhere because um, some
yeah.
interesting colleague of yours has replaced that formula with a value or maybe added 1% to one of the items, that's going
Well,
to
if
be
we're
a
using
break in your
dynamic
formula.
arrays, that can't happen. But yes,
Yes, exactly.
yeah, well,
That's one
that's
of the benefits of dynamic arrays, isn't it?
mm,
And escape takes you back to that one. So this is also, it's kind of an attempt to show you um, holes in your formulas. It's
yes,
not a very
really
good one, to be
useful.
honest, but
Yeah,
it
I feel
makes it
like
easy to.
this is the part that's going to be really useful for financial modelers, because
Mhm.
it's just a really easy way of looking at calculation speed
Yeah,
and seeing where a formula is being used. It's just a really good summary. Love it.
yeah. Also, I think I might point at the next column, which is where the formula is skipped.
What do you mean?
So, well, suppose you have a timeline on row 1, and in column F, there's a break in that timeline. Then it would
Oh,
show F1
those
here.
breaks. Right, right.
Maybe I should create an example just to make that clear. Let's open a new workbook. And so I have this date here, right? And there's a +1 formula here, and I've dragged it to the right, you know. And then over here, I've copied that and replaced it with values.
Mm.
So if I do that same analysis using RefTreeAnalyser, and I do the report formulas, you'll see that this formula is in these cells, control shift left square bracket. It's in these cells,
Yes,
but
and
it's
it
not in
comes.
cell not in cell G1.
Mm.
So if I escape back to my list, it here reports that cell G1 is the one that has a fixed value. So I can jump Control left square bracket here, and you have the highlighted cell that has a fixed value rather than the formula that's supposed to have.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if there's anything else that I wanted. Are we? Yeah, we have 5 minutes left, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So we'll see if there's any, I don't think there's any outstanding questions. So just jump in if there's any questions you want to,
Yeah.
would like Jan to address. Was there anything else you wanted to cover, Jan?
Yeah, just one. I think what's really handy is I think one of the main missing things that I see in almost any model is documentation.
Very true.
And what I think is the minimum amount of documentation is a table of content.
Mm,
So RefTreeAnalyser has a quick button for that. You just click it, it will generate a list of your spreadsheets. It will first ask what you want the table of contents of,
mhm,
and it will see if there's like pivot tables or charts or any other, like, for example, tables in your workbook. It will
mhm.
add those as well.
Yeah.
So let me just click OK, and it'll generate the table of content in a minute. There it is. And it'll give you hyperlinks to the sheets in question, but it will also give you a column to add remarks or an explanation, so you will. And it
Yeah.
will keep this up to date.
Yeah.
So if you
Oh,
enter
really?
anything in this column here and the worksheets change, it
So if you
will keep
change the
this.
tab name, does that update?
Not yet. So there's no functionality in here that actually keeps track between the
Yeah.
tab names and this. So, but if it updates, you just click the button again, it will take
Yeah.
this list and it'll keep the comments with the tab names as long as the
Right.
tab names haven't
Yeah.
changed.
Nice. That's good. I forgot to mention that RefTreeAnalyser was one of the finalists at the Global Excel Awards earlier this year, and I was one of the judges, not for this category, but for another category. So I was already quite well aware of it. So
Yeah. Oh, the
yeah, well
one thing
done.
I forgot to mention, by the way, sorry
Yeah,
for jumping in,
yeah.
because there's only little time left. RefTreeAnalyzer actually consists of 3 add-ins. Um, it also contains my name manager add-in, which allows managing range names. Let me just quickly show it.
Yeah.
For this workbook, this is a giveaway. This workbook has been touched by the CapIQ add-in. So it has hundreds of range names. Well, it's only 118, but if you're any serious user of CapIQ add-in, you will probably have thousands of range names,
Ah,
which, by the way, really slows down opening and saving your workbooks. But a quick way to get rid of the CapIQ range names is just filtering it by IQ underscore,
mhm.
and then you can just hit Control A and the delete key
Okay.
and get rid of all of
Yeah, so
them.
just a bit more sophisticated version of
Yeah,
the name.
so
Mm.
exactly, it allows you to do loads and loads of filtering, which is really useful. For example, I see many on a financial model in my inbox, which has this external reference warning, and the user says, well, I'm positive there's no reference in there. But then when you open up Name Manager, there appear to be
Yes.
some hidden range names that
Yeah.
contain circular external references. So that's why this is a really useful filter.
Yeah, cool.
And then finally, to close this presentation, there's also a Flex Find add-in. And this little add-in, there's an error to fix. There always are errors to fix. This little add-in allows you to find um, stuff in any object that's in your Excel file.
Ah, yeah. So in the objects as well. So like a find,
Yeah. So
but
things like chart titles, how do you call that?
yeah,
Headers and footers in your
yeah,
Excel file.
shapes.
Suppose you ship your add-in and your company decides, suppose you have this huge financial model and your company changes names.
Yeah, right.
Then what you can do is, you can just type in old company name
Yeah.
and go a new company name
So like find and replace.
and do a find and replace everywhere in your model.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it even includes VBA if you have that feature turned off in your trust center.
Great. Great.
Okay.
Okay. We might have to leave it there. Thank you so much for that, Jan. I have
If
put a
there's
link.
any question,
Yeah, there is a question from Peter, but I might get that. I might send that to you later.
and
So
people can
I've
always
given,
contact me using this email
yes,
address.
yes, yes. And I've given a link to where you can download a trial of the tool, and we'll send out in the email, we'll send a code in the trial version. I believe you can sort of use a lot of it, but it's got limited functionality. And then if you like it and you want to buy it, we'll provide a coupon code for that. So
Yep.
yeah. All right.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much,
having
Jan.
me.
That was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. So thanks everyone, and I'll send everything out to you tomorrow. Okay.
Yep.